well. And then speaking of Andre,
These are the boots?
yeah, these are actually an earlier boot than that.
That you get as soon as you look at that. You're
Yes.
like, that's not a human foot.
To me, like this is like one of the number one things here because it's standalone. You totally understand it. You're like, that's Andre's, and yeah, I mean, wow. So this would have been like the 70s into the early 80s for him. You know, the toes all worn out. Really cool stuff.
So Ben Brown, archivist here for WWE. Why don't we start with just what that means?
Okay, so with WWE, being an archivist, it's not the same as maybe being an archivist in a library or at a museum, but in some ways it's the same. So it essentially means that I'm in charge of all things physical, memorabilia, collectibles, anything that like is a product of the show or a product of just kind of what we are as WWE. It runs the gamut, right? There's pieces of gear or things that that the superstars wear. There's correspondence, there's magazines, there's programs, there's like elements of broken whatever. It could be really anything that reflects WWE. So I'm in charge of the history of this company. As well, I'm also in charge of making sure if we need any of this stuff for anything to continue our shows, it comes from here.
It's almost like a museum coupled with a supply house. You know what I mean? As much as some of this stuff maybe hasn't been touched since the 70s or the 80s, some of this stuff is going out the door right now for SummerSlam on the 21st.
Absolutely, yeah. And this facility that we're in right now, it kind of doubles as the archives and as the live event production facility. So it's all of those elements that go into a show, whether it's a television show, just a non-televised live event. Some of our other studio programming. It's really every piece of the puzzle is here.
And you mentioned stuff as small or as light as a piece of paper, a magazine, to as big as the set from a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania. When you first started here, when you first saw this stuff, you said you're a lifelong wrestling fan yourself.
Yes,
what
sir.
impressed you the most? Whether it was an item?
Yeah, some of those gigantic things, which you do walk in and you go like, oh my God, that's the SmackDown fist, and it's a molded fist that's the size of two of your cars. Kind of blow me away. But like just seeing a letter or something from let's say Vince Sr. to his business partner Toots Mont at the time, saying, hey, we should look at this guy Bruno Sammartino. He might be big for the company. That sort of stuff, like I say something like that and it gives me chills, and that can literally be like scratched on a notepad. So that type of thing, and like the care that goes into the history of this place, like Vince's booking books, right, where he writes down all of the matches that ever took place, and his father did that, and that sort of stuff, like I can get lost in, anything that can tell a story. It all tells a story, but some of those like unassuming things, that's what impressed me the most when I first came in.
Now everybody wants to know what the sort of end goal is for this stuff. I mean, will there ever be a place where someone can walk off the street, pay $45 and go check all this stuff out in a museum? You guys do some of that every year around access and things like that, but here it almost has this enchanting simplicity to it. If you're lucky enough to get, to be here, but other than that, I mean, these are so many items that I'm sure millions of wrestling fans would love to see. Are you guys working towards something like that at all?
I think that's always been in the works. It might be a little bit above my pay grade to answer that question specifically, but...
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a chance, and I'm saying that there have been lots of chances and there's been lots of conversation around it, and I know that, honestly, and this is not a secret, that's why I was hired in the first place, was essentially to get this place ready to a place where we could have a Hall of Fame. So if it got me my job, I think it's still possible.
Wow, and how long ago was that, by the way?
I've been here for 10 years.
10 years. Still working on it.
Still working on it. Yeah. Hey, like I said, there are boxes in here that I've been looking at for 10 years that I've still never opened up. So, getting there.
Here we go.
Those are not Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Check that out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, those are.
These are not the.
Those are the ones he would have taken off at WrestleMania with Kurt Angle, right, where he takes off his boot to get out.
God.
I'm sure he wore them over and over again. It's
Oh my God. What I'm so interested in here is also the value or perceived value or potential value of a lot of this stuff. It's kind of unknown, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of these things we talked about how they are one of ones. How do you decide which items should go out the door for something like this when you have so many at your disposal?
Wow. Well, it's a hard decision, first of all, because I treat this whole place like it's my baby.
Was that put on you? Was it you who decided this?
It was me who decided it. I've got the best sort of sense of like what is here, and kind of my thinking is I want to still be able to tell the stories of WWE and of some of these iconic moments. And if I can find a way to still be able to tell the story and then to let loose of some of these iconic items while still having that capacity, that's kind of my parameter, right? I mean, this SummerSlam ring skirt over here was used for almost 10 years.
It's incredible.
And a litany of superstars, interacted with it, and it's like, it's different than a lot of other kind of sports and leagues or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like I always say like, oh my gosh, well I have the jersey from that night. I'm like, well, that person might have worn a jersey that looked just like that the next night. Our talent, our superstars, they might wear the same things over and over again, but if there's a big event, they're building something specific for that event, then oftentimes the talent themselves, it's money out of their own pockets to do this. So, and it's an investment in them as a character. What I like to say about WWE in comparison to like other sports, we're intentionally trying to entertain you, right? You might go to a game and it might be amazing. You're there and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I captured that. Or it might be, I wish I would have slept, But with WWE, the whole entire goal of the product is to entertain the fans.
Yeah, it's Game 6 of the NBA Finals every time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But imagine some of the performers keep their own stuff. What is the handoff there when it comes to somebody wearing something out to the ring? They come back. Is it theirs to give to you guys? Is there stuff that you insist comes here? What's the kind of trade-off there?
It's a negotiation. It's a trade-off. So there's a couple pieces of that, right? So in general, the talent's gear, the stuff that they wear to the ring, that's theirs. They pay for that. That's an investment in their character. Let's say there's a brand new character and WWE has a vision like, hey, here's what we want you to look like. Here's what you want you to wear. That first outfit, that will be paid for by WWE, right? And a lot of these elements, like parts of the matches or things that are featured heavily, those are bought and paid for by the WWE. The gear is the talent's impetus to invest in themselves.
Does WWE, it has people on staff that physically make it and stuff, right?
Yeah, we do. There are.
Or are they outsourcing?
It's a little bit of a combination. We do have seamstresses on staff, and they are also paid by the talent to make specific things, right?
Right.
So it's a little bit of a blurry line. So this talent is still investing, but we're bringing on those seamstresses and steamsters in order to kind of keep things going. Like, hey, we need this needs to be repaired, or we're working on something for the show. So it's a little bit of a mix.
This is very unassuming.
Oh man, there's only 2 people that could have possibly worn that.
And this, it's the more famous
Wow.
of the 2. And it's funny because on the bottom you're like, okay, cool, that doesn't really look that big, but just the distance between the shoulder.
It's funny that it's like, but hey, you wear tights, that's what you would be shocked how much that could get stretched out.
Yeah.
But
So Andre the Giant, WrestleMania 3.
that's WrestleMania 3?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, absolutely.
with the wrestling collector world, would you agree also, I know that in the last few months you guys had a high profile series on A&E, and now the average wrestling fan is seeing this and thinking, oh, these are things I could maybe own. Before that though, was it kind of a small group that owned a lot of the items that say you didn't at the time?
Absolutely, it's a small group, and I think that might be. I think what you said, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, I don't know that people thought that they could own this stuff.
I didn't. You know?
And that's what kind of made that community really special. A lot of the folks that are in that collective community have a link to the talent. They have a link to
once
the
you're
wrestling
in,
business.
you're in. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm telling you, when you get into this space and into wrestling and into WWE, and you're locked in, like, there's kind of nothing like it. You know, you feel like you're part of a community. You feel like you're a part of that. You know, you're a part of creating those moments, right? Like, some people, like, actually, they're like, well, I was there and I saw this match and I saw him wearing that and I was cheering, so they feel like they kind of own that because they cheered the good guy, or they turned on this, or you know, they got involved, like. And that's the great thing about our fan base, is that, like, that's what makes this so exhilarating, is that you can be a part of it. Mm-hmm. You know,
I mean, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. I always say that, like, it's that friend that's always there for you. You know, there's no off season. And, like, for me, like, I'm 35 years old. I'm literally as old, more or less, as WrestleMania. And I can trace my entire life to a moment in wrestling and how I felt about it at the time.
Yeah.
I can decide kind of, you know, how much of a bratty teenager I was based on how much I liked this guy or didn't like that guy.
Yeah.
And so now, you know, in adulthood, being able to go back and actually own and hold some of those moments, you know, it is something that until recently I didn't think was possible. And you kind of maybe needed that gateway. Now that WWE is providing it, and along with Goldin and putting these items into auction, you know, you would have no way to believe that that is the Money in the Bank briefcase from SummerSlam 2013 unless it was being provided by Ben Brown and WWE. And I think that WWE has always been at the forefront of that next wave of whatever it is, whether it be the internet or now it's, you know, recently social media. And now, as I mentioned, collecting, auctions, things like that. It's becoming not just big business, but pop culture.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of these items.
Yeah.
So, you know, what is it? 88 to so almost 25 years of SummerSlam lineage, and you're asked, hey, let's get some SummerSlam centric items here. How did you settle on the shears, Boss Man's nightstick, this very dangerous here barbed wire baseball bat, the Money in the Bank briefcase?
well, it was trying to figure out stuff that kind of spanned that history of SummerSlam, right? So we have things from essentially what is the beginning of SummerSlam.
Oh, yeah.
You know, 88, 89, you know, to the mid 2000s, and that kind of era of where you would have something like a barbed wire baseball bat, to Randy Orton and Daniel Bryan and that whole thing. So I tried to basically capture the breadth of what this event was, or is, and continues to be. And it's also just fun. Like, look at this. Like, it's color. Like, I'm looking at all of this. It's like, it's very colorful. It's fun, and like I said, all of these elements are also things that right away you're like, I know what that is. I know who that's from. Whatever. So that having those quickly identifiable items, I think is really a big part of this.
So I'm someone who, I'll admit to how much of a SummerSlam nerd I am. I have a little bit of a SummerSlam 1992 collection.
Okay.
That
Tell me
contains,
more about it.
Contains the hat from the event, the foam finger, you know, a program, things like that, because I thought that is as far as maybe my collection could go. Here I am looking at the ring apron, not just from SummerSlam 1992, but from the, you know, the 3 before and the 5 after. And I, if you had asked me a week ago, would have told you there's no way that I could come into possession of that, legally, of course. And now it's something that on this Goldin auction, everyone is going to have a chance to own. And I can't imagine I'm the only person who SummerSlam and SummerSlam 92 means a lot to. So I just think that, you know, having these being put out into the ether is going to probably lead to a new generation of fans who can feel a part, as close to a part of the industry as ever. Because until, you know, before this, it was a program or hat, you know?
Yeah, and some of those programs, hats, and ticket stubs go for a lot of money as well.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the actual ring worn, ring used piece of the event. So it's a whole different level.
The place we're at right now, this is actually also a part of the auction. One of the experiences is a tour of this facility, correct? And that's something that it's, you know, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I'm blessed to be doing this here with you today. This isn't something that a lot of people get to do, right? You were telling me a little bit before, who does sometimes get to do this? Friends and family members? Like, do you have to win the IC title before you get to walk through these doors?
Oh, I've had no friends or family come in here at all. No, just you know, listen. So the actual auction is having, by the way, Triple H come with you to tour
and
the
you, though,
archive.
are you there
and
too?
myself
Okay.
too. Yep, having Triple H and myself. He's a massive historian. He's going to point out things that I would never be able to point out, and I can also help him along the way. So Yeah, I mean, as far as who's allowed in here and who has access to this place, I mean, this is a working facility. So it's not just here for, hey, knock, 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 can I please come in? When the superstars come into town, they're getting acquainted with the company. Maybe I'll bring them out here for a couple of minutes, just to show some cool stuff, get excited about the brand, get excited about the company. Some executives at the company, if they want to, if they want to get, a culture to the brand. Outside of that, it's pretty much closed doors.
How often are members of the creative team, how often are members of WWE coming through here to get inspiration, to find out what's maybe here, or do they just call up you and say, hey Ben, do we have that skull from that thing? How does that work?
It's the latter.
Yeah?
It is. It's, do you have anything like X? Do you have the original this? Or, hey, we're trying to do something like, do you happen to have this? And I mean, listen, most of the time I do. Sometimes we're like, no, but we could find it. Or I oftentimes reach out to the rest of the community and some other, you'll see stuff I borrowed from collectors like on TV for certain reasons. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically like this is the repository. I'm the face of that repository, and people call and say, I need X. Do you have it? I have the letter or the original sort of sale contract from Vince to Vince's father to him to buy what was then Capital Wrestling Corporation. Titan Sports buys Capital Wrestling, and now Vince's father has a employee contract essentially. So it's that like genesis of where we are now. So again, things like that, like that's like Magna Carta type stuff.
What about stuff that isn't here yet,
Yeah.
right? I know that was a bit of the mission of the A&E series, but maybe stuff that you guys didn't find that go around, but things that in your brain are out there that you're still looking for, whether actively or if it, there was a knock at the door and it was somebody with this. What would you be the happiest with?
I can tell you exactly what that particular item would be. The Macho King crown.
Ah, yes.
Macho Man's Macho King crown. And scepter would be great as well. Mm-hmm. But that original crown with the jewel, nobody knows who made it, where it is. I even had a conversation with the Macho Man's widow, Len, and she was like, Ben, do you know where that crown is? No. And the fact that this hasn't popped up, the real deal Macho King crown. I mean, if somebody came to the I'd be drooling.
if you're on social media and you have that crown, you can take the tour. If you bring the crown, if you have that crown, that's the exception.
Easily
right?
done.
Yeah. Now let's talk about some of the characters from the world of wrestling that maybe are into this themselves. Who collects the most of whether it's their own stuff or other stuff, and then who's just like the minute they walk through the curtain, they're like, here, take it, Ben, I don't need it.
Well, the latter, and it's not necessarily to me, but I know that Big E, for example, he makes his gear, and he sells it, and then he takes what he sells it for to make his next gear.
A lot of people do that. Smart.
He's very. I mean, it's basically nothing in, nothing out.
Doesn't like clutter. He's a Marie Kondo kind of guy.
Yes, he is. I think he wants to live in a tiny house. We've talked about it at least. But as far as people who collect, I mean, it runs the gamut. I mean, a couple of years ago, we put Jeff Jarrett into the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, hey, Jeff, did you keep any of your stuff? And he sends me a picture. He's like this? And I got the heavy, and this is all on display for access. I got the heaviest box. He said, did the Eagle land? And it was an unbelievable amount of stuff. So, and again, and that's people who reinvested in it. Your Ultimate Warrior was the same. I had the chance to talk to Warrior, when he came back and was put into the Hall of Fame, and we talked about this, and he said, I didn't want to be seen in the same color combination night after night. I spend my own money because I want people to feel like they've had a unique experience every time they've seen the Ultimate Warrior. And also merchandise. I want somebody to be able to go, okay, cool, I can make that warrior and that gear. Oh, it's smart.
Let me ask you, so when it comes to these, wrestlers with their own gear, who was the hardest to pry an item from, and what was the item?
Ooh, I would actually say, and this goes back to the Macho Man. We put him into the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, and his widow Lynn, she had a lot of his stuff. But I literally, in order to borrow anything or pry anything, it was the money exchange, and then also driving. So okay, so she's in Florida. She's like, I don't want it to get shipped. So I literally packed it up in a road case. I brought a road case there, packed everything in nice bags, and drove it all the way to California in order to display it. And she said, "How's it going?" I said, "I'm in Colorado." So that like level, and then again, it's very meaningful. I mean, it's stuff that like it's a part of your life, and it's a part of what who your character is. So, you know, and on the A&E show, it kind of like it also was very like some people were very, very attached to the stuff. You know, Jerry Lawler is also invests in his own stuff, and he's never gotten rid of anything. So in order to like make a deal with him, and by the way, that deal is contingent. Anytime you want to wear this thing, you know, give me a call. I'll send it to you and wear it, but we'll bring it back and we'll put it in the archive. So he was a tough nut to crack in that regard. But I think just that having that relationship and being able to like know that they're getting something as well is a big part of this.
So we talk about Macho Man, we talk about Ultimate Warrior. These stories are, you know, open and shut, sadly. But you mentioned Big E, wrestlers who are still out there making moments every night on SmackDown, Raw, at SummerSlam. Are you watching all of these matches and all these items with the eye of like, that's something we should hang on to? And what's the process like for you acquiring it, whether it be from the performer or the staff on site, to make sure something that happens on the air gets properly saved and handled and then maybe winds up here?
And the majority of the time, it's the staff on site that I'm dealing with, right? So I'm watching the show, or I'm there, and it's like, wow, that was a big moment, and that like, you know, that table broke, or you know, we used a piano and it crashed over somebody's back or whatever, and it's like, and it broke up in a cool way, and it's like, we should keep that. We should keep that. We should keep that. So I will continue to just get pallets of stuff that I've texted to the props guys, you know, in the truck to say like, hey, would you mind keeping that? And there's people who actively, you know, talking about Brock Lesnar. He had a match at Survivor Series with Cena and Rollins?
Rumble.
Rumble with Cena
That's
and Rollins. So he takes the monitor, and he literally, I love that match. He smashes it against the steel steps. It explodes, absolutely explodes. Someone in the truck texted me, said like, you might want to hold on to this. We can't use this anymore. And it's just people keeping their eye out. It's like those are the like things that you interact with. I mean, I also have the door that he tore off the car and threw halfway across the arena. So yeah, like people are actively helping me look for this stuff. As far as the talent themselves, you know, it might come a little later. It might not come immediately. It's not going to be like, oh my God, you wore this thing. Can you please send it to me? It's like, you know, hey, that's become sort of iconic. Back to Seth Rollins, for example, his white SummerSlam gear. Mm-hmm. Fun story on that. Vince McMahon did not like the white gear, so he's like, I can't wear this again. So I'm holding on to it, and I think he used some elements of it in his WrestleMania gear in 2020 as well. But yeah, it's a mishmash. I don't want to ever disrespect somebody. It's obviously their property, but as we kind of work to enshrine certain moments, whether it's in loan or a purchase, you know, that's the goal, is to find. And oftentimes it's in retrospect, right? It's like, oh wow, that was an incredible match at Royal Rumble, you know.
These SummerSlam items that are going to be in the Goldin auction, we talked about some of the moments that could be future SummerSlam. I assume you're going to be watching on the 21st,
yes, sir,
and have your eyes on some of those items that could be in a future Goldin auction. But Ben Brown, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited about this. Thank you.